Hi, welcome to a special edition of our Community Access. It's a wildlife edition. Spring is not here yet, but it's around the corner, and because of that, I'm always disturbed to see dead animals on the side of the road. So I have asked our local wildlife expert, Holly Hadac, to come in and chat with me. Hopefully we're going to have a good chat about how to avoid some of those dead animals on the side of the road. She's a rehabber too. So you are an advocate for animal safety on the road. Now spring is another, I'd say, month away, but with that we're going to see baby deer on the side of the road, and we'll get into the turtle subject, but there's a bad game going around where kids are trying to spin turtles around. So anyhow, how do we avoid coming into disastrous contact with the wildlife that we have around us? We don't live with them very well.
Oh, it's just basically being observant, especially at night. People should slow down. I'm not usually out at night, but when I am out at night, I slow down and I look all the time for eyes reflecting off of the road, or especially if you've got a lot of brush alongside the road, you want to look for wild animals to be in that brush.
And so if you're driving along and you see a deer cross the road ahead of you, you think, got that one, I missed it, you know, I'm safe. But that's not necessarily true, is it? Doesn't a buck usually send the girls out?
He could, especially during the breeding season, which is more into the fall, but they usually travel in groups, in herds, so if you see one deer cross the road, there could very well be other ones. And in the spring, there could very well be a fawn, and a fawn will try to follow its mother. Normally they can't keep up for the first few weeks of their life, and they'll plop down, and sometimes it's in the middle of a road.
Oh my goodness. Well, that brings me to, and I've heard you say this before, they don't have a scent. When do they have their babies? What time of year?
Into May.
Okay.
Although a doe will cycle 5 times until she gets pregnant, so she can have a fawn into September. And there are some wildlife rehabilitators like me, I mean, I haven't had them that late in the year, that do end up with young fawns into September.
I wondered why I've seen them with the spots on them so late in the year. And so they don't have a scent.
They don't have a scent the first 3 weeks of their life. Mom does not stay with them for that reason. She'll feed 3 or 4 times in a 24-hour period, and she cleans up and walks away. If that fawn yells for help, Mom will come crashing out of the woods, which could be dangerous to the person. But this is how we get a lot of fawns that in rehab that people pick up because they see a fawn alone in the woods. I don't know why they expect the doe to be standing there when they approach, but the doe is nearby somewhere, but it's not going to be standing near the baby. The fawn will stay exactly where Mom tells it the first week of its life. Wow. It doesn't matter what happens. Farmers scoop them up in combines and kill them often because even though those machines are big and noisy, that fawn's going to stay where Mom told it to stay.
Wow, isn't that something?
And then the 2nd and 3rd weeks of their life, they can travel a little better, but like I said, they can't keep up with Mom, and they'll just plop down. Or at night, Mom might park them somewhere where it looks safe to her, and daylight comes, and then here's this fawn in the middle of a sidewalk, and then people start calling.
Because you're on the DNR website as an accredited wildlife rehab.
Right, we're all licensed by the DNR. We're licensed to take in injured, orphan, sick animals in whatever kind of need. And our licenses expire every 5 years. That's new. It didn't used to be that way, but that's a good thing because at the end of the 5 years we are inspected, and we should be inspected by the conservation officer on a regular basis. We also have ongoing training that we have to do. There are certain classes that are approved at conferences. We can take online classes. It's different than getting a license, but for us that are already licensed, that's how we have to maintain our licenses.
So I should back up. I want to ask you about your studies and how you become qualified. But prior to dedicating her life to animals, the animals that we bump into daily, Holly was an Oakland County Sheriff Deputy, correct? So how did you go from that jump to animals?
Well, that's how I met my mentor in 1996, I think it was. I was sent, I was an Oakland County Sheriff's Deputy on the road, and mostly in this part of the county. I mean, I worked all over the county, but mostly out here. And I loved the rural areas. I don't like pavement, so I like the woods. So I was able to do also a lot of DNR type enforcement of the DNR laws, and I love that part. And we get to know the DNR officers there, and those are the ones that regulate us, that approve us for a license, or they'll call us for an animal and so forth. But dispatch sent me to an injured fox in the road. And just before that, I had seen an article in a local paper in Rochester about a wildlife rehabilitator who had a baby possum in her hand. And that caught my eye, and I read the article, and I looked up her address and her phone number because I knew our paths were going to cross someday.
Oh.
So then shortly after that, I got the call about the fox, and I called her, and she sent a man out that specializes in fox. And from that time forward, I started taking her hit by car animals, a rabbit, a squirrel, and I would ask a lot of questions, and I'll never forget her saying this. She said, "You ought to do this, I'll help you learn."
Wow.
Yeah, I think about that when I'm picking up all this poop in these pens, but anyway, so that was a while ago, and then there was a snafu with the licensing process at the DNR. That's another story, so I just worked under her license for a while, assisting her, and then got my own. I don't know how long I've had mine, it's been a while.
Yeah, it seems like back in 2004 I was trying to seek you out because this is something I think is important to our entire community, to number one know that there is wildlife rehab accessibility to people in our community. If it's not Holly, there's certainly the DNR website that they can go to. I noticed that all of Oakland County is listed, and people in Oakland County.
Well, the whole state, yes. We all end up with specialties, so they should read that first, call the appropriate person, or we just refer them back. If it's something that we can't handle and they need to talk to a specialist that's not on the website, we'll refer them.
You know who they can go to.
Yes.
So your specialty is large
mammals. And the reason for that is I have 5 acres, so I have room for bigger pens. Most rehabilitators don't have that. I'm the only one in Oakland County that takes in fox. There are 2 of us that take in fawns. But in 2006, we had 21 people in Oakland County on the website for Oakland County alone. Now there are 5 of us, I think.
Oh my.
And
so you're overwhelmed, I'm sure, come springtime.
Yes.
Or is that year round?
Yes. Well, I get calls all year round. Because I get calls for injured animals, for mangy animals. I love mange cases. It's a piece of cake to fix. Very easy. All it takes is a little bit of vigilance on the caller's part. But yeah, so I do get calls. Injured deer, mangy coyotes, and mangy foxes, and
So we do have fox in the area that we need to be on the lookout for. And we do, and we're going to talk later more about this, but we do have coyotes in our area. Deer, raccoon, birds. What
Possums.
would you do? Possums, injured birds. You would refer somebody else to.
Yes, because I don't know anything about birds. We're allowed to take in a few certain birds under our state permit from the Michigan DNR, but if we take in migratory birds, which are a lot of our songbirds, the waterfowl, that type of thing, we have to have a federal permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that's a whole nother ball game to get licensed by them. So there are requirements for each type of license.
That makes sense because it's a migratory animal, etc. So I'm going to wrap this up, and then we'll come back. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back. If someone unfortunately happens to hit a critter and it's not killed, it's not badly injured, what do you recommend they do?
Well, a lot of people will call me right from their phone. They even have the police there waiting to, for example, euthanize a deer that's been hit by a car, and they won't let the police do that until they talk to me. And sometimes it is a euthanasia case. But they can call me, especially if they're just sitting by the side of the road. I don't want them to have to go through a website to find the proper person. But I'll know from their description whether it's a euthanasia case or not.
Okay, no matter what. But don't touch it.
Right.
Animals can be dangerous when they're injured.
They can be. And we know how to handle them. But yeah, people shouldn't. In general, if they want to move an animal, a crate is the best thing, heavy leather gloves. I've had people get injured adult raccoons that are mad safely into a container by taking a garbage can, like the Tupperware can, turn it on its side, and you can use a shovel or a broom and shoo it in the can and slowly stand it upright and put the lid on.
That's a good way to do it. I wouldn't want anything to do with trying to touch it. Don't go away. Please come back because I have so many questions for you. And don't you go away. We'll be back in a few seconds.
This is OCTV, Oxford Community Television.
Welcome back to this special edition of our Community Access Living with Wildlife. And with me is our local wildlife expert and rehab person, Holly Hadac. thank you for being here today. I have so many questions for you, and forgive me if I'm bouncing all over the place, but we were in our last segment talking about injured animals. So if, you know, my heart is huge when it comes to injured animals, and I have been known to tell my kids, okay, bring that injured baby bird in, but what should we do? If we have to do something right away, you're not available, what should we not do?
With an injured baby bird in particular?
Or a baby, any baby critter.
Anything?
What should we feed them? Shouldn't we feed
No.
them? Should we give them water? What should we do?
Yeah, you need to, unless the animal's in obvious danger, like in the middle of the road, you can leave it there and call us first. And then we'll tell you what's natural and normal. A lot of people don't know what's natural and normal in wildlife. For example, the fawn being alone in the woods the first few weeks of its life.
Yeah, right.
They think it's been abandoned. Wildlife doesn't abandon its babies any more than we do. And they want their babies just as badly as we do.
Yeah.
People think they can block an adult raccoon out of the attic, and then they're surprised that she's digging the house apart trying to get to her babies.
Yeah.
I would rather people leave it alone and call us first.
Okay. No feeding, no giving, no going straight to the fridge and giving it a big glass of milk.
No, people, especially ladies, want to feed this fawn a bottle, and they want to feed it cow's milk because that's what you have at home. Wildlife can't digest cow's milk. It will kill a fawn. And I've picked up many fawns that people have fed a whole bottle of milk to, and then the fawn dies. I get to watch the fawn die that overnight, or usually they're dead in the morning. There's a reason that fawns don't nurse from cows.
Sure.
All these milks are specific to that formula. The carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats, and we do our best to recreate that with the different formulas we use, but it's still not the exact same thing. There's very little research done on wildlife as far as the milk content.
And you mentioned raccoons trying to get to their babies, and I've heard this before. Go ahead and block up the attic, the babies are in there, and they're going to die, and the mom will leave. No, that doesn't happen. How do you handle it?
A lot of people will trap or have a raccoon in the attic trapped in the spring, particularly March. That's when their babies start being born, although we have gotten calls in January.
Wow.
January through the end of the summer, but mostly it's in March, and she's in there to have her babies. She'll move them anyway when their eyes are open at about 3 weeks, so some people just let them stay there, and then when they see mom leaving with the babies, then they'll take some action to keep her from getting back in there again.
To trap or not to trap, how do you get rid of critters if they're driving you crazy? Raccoons, or I've heard of people having squirrels come in their house, and I do get, and bats, I know that's a problem. So what do we do when we get into a situation like that?
Well, you want to make it uncomfortable for the animal to be there. For example, a raccoon in the attic or the chimney. A friend of mine's chimney cap blew off before she knew that happened. Mama raccoon had made a nest in her chimney. So she blared gospel music up the chimney, and Mom immediately started moving the babies out.
Really?
So if they're in your attic, you can put a light bulb up there and a radio up there. You know, she won't like that. Now, I've never used this technique, but I know 2 other wildlife rehabilitators that have, and they tell me it works every time to put ammonia on cloths and throw it where you don't want the animal.
Oh, well, that would make sense.
A vet friend will take his dirty kitty litter and pour it down the den where groundhogs like to make their den under his barn, and that makes them move out. So there's a lot of more natural things we can do.
Right. And so how about deer? I know people run into a problem in the summertime when they're growing garden. They want vegetables, and the deer go after them. Is there any good trick?
Yeah, you sure you want to hear this part?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Well, a lot of people use fencing. They can jump 6-foot fences very easily. And I've actually had euthanized fawns that tried to jump fences that were 4 to 6 feet high that Mom was able to get over and the fawn wasn't. So that's, fencing is, that can be a hazard to them. But my son wanted to have a corn garden in the front yard, and I said, oh, good, we can watch the deer eat your corn. Well, we were reading a book that talked, this is another story, that talked about keeping animals out of your territory, and he peed around his garden every 2 or 3 days or after a rain, and not an animal ate anything. Groundhog, raccoon, deer, and deer can stand and reach over. They didn't eat a single thing. The following 2 summers he worked for a farmer, and he wasn't home very much, and they ate everything. So he didn't. So it worked for us.
So you're in.
Sounds odd, but it worked for us.
Oh, it's worth a try. I know that they even eat the hostas and the pretty flowers, etc.
A lot of people use that spray that keeps the deer away, and they tell me that works too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Much better than trapping in Now there's a difference between trapping and release, and then there's, are there trappers and euthanize, right?
Yes.
So they're, when they release them, where do they take them?
Well,
For the most part.
I've never had a trapper tell me this, but other people have told me that the trappers will tell them what they do is they'll take the mother and they dump her in the woods somewhere, and it takes about 2 days for people to hear the babies crying. And then the trapper comes back and gets the babies, and he takes them to the woods and dumps them there. And I guess people think it's a happy reunion, but it's not. Mom's panicked and she's run off. You know, they don't know where the food source is. They don't know where the housing is. She doesn't know where her babies are. It is kinder to euthanize them than to put them through that. And it's never a good idea to relocate an animal in the winter for the same reasons. They don't know where the housing is and they don't know where the food source is.
Right.
So hopefully these other methods we talked about would get the animal out of that area. Right.
And how about mothballs?
I've heard that works, but again, I haven't used that. I've never had raccoons or squirrels in my attic.
You're in the business of bringing them to your home, right? Instead of trying to get rid of them.
Yeah.
I want to talk quite a bit about coyotes because they've been in our news lately. I don't know if we have enough room on this segment, but we're going to get this started. We do have fox in our area. We do have coyotes. And I've even heard cougars being close to our area. How do you keep the coyotes away?
Well, everything that coyotes do is all about the food. Everything they do is about the food. If there's no food source, they're going to pass right through your property and they won't stop. There was a researcher on Rhode Island, Dr. Numi Mitchell, that has, I think, 10 packs of coyotes, radio collared. She got her funding from a wealthy friend whose dog was eaten by a coyote. And she has these fancy, expensive GPS collars that store the coyote's location. So she comes up with these neat 3D graphs about where they spend their time. So when they started tracking them, they found out that the neighbor was feeding them. And the neighbor, not at first, but eventually did admit feeding them. And she thought if she had food and food out for the coyotes, that they would eat the food and not the cats and dogs. But all it did was draw them to the home. Within 2 days of this woman not feeding anymore, the coyote didn't go to her home anymore. They're nocturnal and crepuscular, which means they hunt at dawn and dusk. But we see them more during the daylight hours in the summer, you know, because we don't have as many dark hours. But if there's a food source in the middle of the day, they're going to be out there. They're very opportunistic. They'll eat anything. They eat out of compost piles. There are a lot of a lot of people don't know that. They will. There are a lot of people that feed feral cats, and they don't want their neighbors to know because they don't want to be known as a cat person
lady.
in the neighborhood. I've found this out through many phone calls. And that will draw them in too. If they can secure the food so it doesn't draw the coyotes in, that would be a good thing. But
okay, so they'll eat any kind of food then. You're talking cat, dog food, and garbage.
Yeah, oh yes. Oh, we've been analyzing poop for about 5 years, and I'm processing some at home now, and I just took some apart. It looks like poop, but it's all hair, and it wraps around all the bones and everything else that could hurt them. And I unfolded a piece of plastic about this size in one of the scats. So
we're going to talk more about coyotes when we come back. Don't go away. We have one more segment, and it's all about coyotes.
Woke up and for the first time, the animals were gone. Our clocks are ticking now, so before our time is gone, I cover my eyes, still all I see is you.
Welcome back to our Community Access, a special edition on how to live with wildlife because it's all around us. And with me is my guest, Holly Hadac. Holly, you're a coyote expert. We were just touching on coyotes in our last segment. Holly is doing research on coyotes, so we're going to chat quite a bit this segment on coyotes, simply because I don't think people in Oxford need to be afraid. I know that there's a bit of hysteria, and I think the jury is still out as to whether the 2 horses in North Oxford or Metamora were really injured by coyotes. And I'd like to hear your theory on it, what you can tell me, but I just want to have people feel a little more comfortable about living with our wildlife, including coyotes.
Okay. I could talk about coyotes till midnight, so we better
Good.
We better get going.
Tell me why we shouldn't be afraid.
Well, I'm with the research project, the Southeastern Michigan Coyote Research Project, where we have trapped and radio collared coyotes, and we track them. It's a PhD study of a man named Bill Dodge. Our website is semcrp.org. So before that, I started traveling the Northeast, Midwest parts of the country. I've worked with other biologists trapping coyotes. I've talked to coyote biologists all over the country, and I really came to understand how misunderstood they are. And there's a lot of myths out there that I love to debunk. I don't care if people love or hate coyotes, but I want your opinion to be based on fact that's backed up by research. So where do you want me to start?
Do we need to be afraid of
No, coyotes are the most timid animals I've ever worked with. When we have them in a foothold or a snare, I walk up to them and I put a net over them and they fall over. And they don't move. We put our hands on them. We don't pin them down. We just put our hands on them so they know they can't go anywhere. We anesthetize them. They never flinch when a needle goes in them. Their pain tolerance is really high, I think. And then we collar them, we weigh them. We give them a reversal agent. We put them in a big crate to recover. When they're recovered, we open the door and they never leave. They rarely leave. Most of the time, we have to take the top off the crate and take it off. And they look back like, what am I supposed to do? We have to poke at them to get them to leave. And I told Bill when we started this, they were going to be so afraid of us that they're going to poop on themselves. So we get a fresh stool sample. And they do every time they do. When a couple weeks ago, a couple of animal control officers checked a coyote that was in the woods. A lady called me. She, by the description of what the coyote was doing, I knew it was in a snare, and she had watched it for 2 days. I'm glad she didn't watch it a little longer. The law is the trap has to be labeled, and they have to be checked every 24 hours, and neither of that was done. So even if it was a property owner's property and trap, that's an illegal, that's a poached coyote. So the Huron Valley, Humane Society of Huron Valley, animal officers went out there. I'd already told them how these coyotes react with us. They didn't have a net. A lot of these animal control places, I'm finding out, don't have nets. But they walked up to the coyote, and the coyote laid down. So they put their control stick around it. They loosened the snare, took their stick off, and they stepped back, and the coyote didn't leave. They told me they had to step way back for this coyote to take off. And I'm so glad that they had that personal experience so that they can tell what happened to them rather than other people telling what happened to them.
Relate it. And so they're not, they are opportunistic, I know they are, and you just mentioned that. But you do have to keep an eye on your dogs and cats, but they don't go after, I mean, what? So
well,
what
you should always keep your eye. Your cat shouldn't be outside in the first place.
I agree. Right.
There were researchers a year ago, January, that published actual papers that they determined that cats eat tens of billions of small mammals and birds every year in the United States. They're the biggest predators of wildlife. The dogs, there's a couple in Addison Township whose 2 little Shih Tzus chase the coyotes off their property all the time.
Oh my.
Those of us that live in the country don't worry about our big dogs, but your little dog has just probably has statistically a better chance. They can be, but they can be picked up by hawks and owls too. I've heard of that happening.
I have too. In fact, my son saw that happen to a rabbit the other night with an owl. It was nighttime hunting. And so their habits are, and they eat what?
They eat their diet is mostly rabbits and rodents. They eat the same thing that fox do, but people don't freak out about fox. So that's why you don't see a lot in one area. You'll usually have either coyotes or fox. But rabbits and rodents, we've found some squirrel, we've found some raccoon, and we can actually tell by the hair and by the teeth whether it's a mole or a vole or other type of critter.
In their feces? In
their feces, yep.
Okay. And do they pack? I know you'll hear them howling at night. So.
Well, researchers actually call them family units. And when we all say pack, it's just a slang word. But they don't form true packs like wolves do, say a dozen. But they hunt singly or in pairs. And I've actually witnessed that working with biologists, how they hunt. So they don't run in a pack. We saw one radio-collared coyote, this was in Massachusetts, trespass in another radio-collared coyote's territory. And when the mated pair, they mate for life and they're monogamous, when the mated pair came out of the woods and smelled that this other coyote had been on their turf, they went back in the woods and got their juveniles. There were 2 of them. So the 4 of them came out, and they, instead of tracking this way, the way the coyote went, they went that way. Around a curve, we couldn't see them, but we could hear where the dogs in the neighborhood started barking as the coyotes were traveling. And then they started yelling at the other coyote to stay off their turf. They're silent when they hunt. They'll teach the puppies how to howl, and I've actually heard that during tracking. But they'll yell it's mostly territorial challenges when you hear that.
Oh, didn't know that. Okay.
Or they'll call looking for somebody. Well, I witnessed 2 coyotes hunting together, and in Massachusetts, they were digging in the ground, probably trying to get bugs or voles or mole or mouse or something. And it was very windy, and one wandered off, and the other one, a few minutes later, looked up, couldn't see its mate, and howled for the mate, and the mate was upwind, so couldn't hear it. He howled again. And then he did some more hunting and then just wandered off. So that's typical. And
they eventually, I'm sure, caught up with each other. Now I want to hear the end of that love story. So we don't really have to worry about them in the neighborhoods of Oxford.
No, in Addison Township, a man was hunting on a friend's property a few years ago. He saw the neighbors, this is 20 acres, and he saw the neighbor's dog trotting up the property. And he saw a coyote come out of the field and bite down on the back of the dog. From all this big distance, this man yelled at the coyote, and the coyote dropped the dog and took off. Oh, okay. So the man took the dog home, told the people what happened. The next day he's hunting, and there's that dog walking up the driveway again. Now, those are the kind of people that will complain that a coyote ate their dog.
Yeah, right. So you got to keep an eye on your critter. If your animal is
it was a small dog.
Oh, okay. So we have to keep an eye on ourselves.
The researchers are now, I go to the
critters.
Conferences that these researchers put on for themselves about coyotes. Now they're saying there is no such thing as coyote management. We have to manage ourselves. Yeah. And that means not feeding them intentionally or unintentionally, like with a compost pile or cat food or dog food. And there is such a thing as coyote hazing. I had a coyote chase a rabbit into my yard a few years ago. It was the coolest thing. It made my week. The rabbit ran about 20 feet in front of me, and the coyote was so focused on that rabbit he didn't even see me. And he was about 30 feet from me, and I yelled at him, and he just made a U-turn and went into the woods.
Really? Yeah. So they are afraid of people.
Oh yeah, he'll get that rabbit someday, but not while I'm watching. Their hunt results in a kill about 35% of the time, so they're not always successful. Oh. But people need to ask themselves, why would this wild animal be different than any other wild animal that's afraid of people? And they're not. There's a lady in Ortonville that's afraid to ride her horse. She thinks a coyote's going to come charging out of the woods and take her off her horse. A wolf won't even do that.
Yeah, right.
Their #1 tactic is to avoid people, any wild animal.
Yeah, I can't imagine. They're at the most they weigh 35 pounds.
Ours have been between 25 and 32 pounds, except we had one female that was 37 pounds. Now the eastern coyotes, eastern part of the country, decades ago have bred with red wolves. They do have red wolf DNA in them. Not very much, I can't give you a percentage, but the western coyotes are about 25 pounds. They're about 10 pounds lighter.
That's fascinating. And I hate to do this, but we do have to wrap it up, and I really want to ask, you sound so shorthanded in the spring. So how do the rescuers in the state of Michigan get help? They have other people sign up to become rescuers, right?
Well, we have volunteers. We can supplement somebody. I can't think of the word right now. Supplement. We can supplement somebody. We can't do that with funds. I don't know why the DNR doesn't want us to supplement people for funds. I have a couple of guesses, but so it's required that they attend a 2-day class taught by the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. And this class is taught all over the world. Wow. It's in Michigan. I think they have it coming up in March out in the Ann Arbor area. I believe it's in March. And you have to have an association with the vet, some volunteer experience. So
easy enough.
And these are not pets.
No,
these are not pets. These are wild animals. You don't let them mingle with the cat and dog. You don't have a lot of people coming in and seeing them.
Don't let them sit on the sofa.
No, heck no. They should be in a room all by themselves where nobody goes in there except you to feed them before they go outside. And when they go outside, if I have volunteers, they're never with the fawns, because these fawns can imprint so easily. They can help with the raccoons or the foxes and possums and things like that, but never the fawns.
Well, I want to come out and visit you on your wildlife farm soon. Thank you for coming to the studio today.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is not the last time we're going to see Holly here. It's either going to be
it's
on
not midnight yet.
Community Access. Yeah, I could just sit here and listen. Go ahead, keep talking. But unfortunately, we do have to wind this up. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For visiting us.
Thank you
today.
for this
I really
opportunity to
appreciate it.
educate people.
Oh yeah. We all need to learn how to live with our wildlife. Stop running turtles over. And
Yeah,
yes,
reckless driving is illegal.
I was going to say, okay, do you brake for deer or don't you? But in my heart, I try to avoid it. But thank you, Holly.
Oh, you're welcome,
And if anybody
Karen.
wants to find out more information, go to the DNR website.